such a bad plan, 'cause I really think you want me to stay.
Alright, today we're going to be looking at where winds meet. Now, there's a lot that can be said about this game because the game tries to do a lot. So the first thing I'm going to try and do is give you some basic facts about this game, what it is, what you're doing in it, how you can play it, that kind of stuff, because while I believe that there's a lot of correct information out there, it's not necessarily the most accurate and representative of what you're actually doing or can do in the game. For an example, what is it? Where Winds Meet is a free-to-play, open-world action RPG in the style of something like a Ghost of Tsushima or an Assassin's Creed game. However, it is not indicative of those in terms of like gameplay and systems and stuff like that. It has optional MMO and co-op elements, but it can be played completely solo, which is something we'll get back to. Here are some example screenshots. An idea of what you can expect, similar to something like Elden Ring or styled games like that, in terms of like the boss presentation, setup, that kind of thing, the open world aspects to it, the dungeons, right? So obviously that begs the question of what are you doing in this game, and that goes to our next bullet. It is, I would say, broadly speaking, split into three main sections: story missions and things that relate to the story, cutscenes and stuff like that. This screenshot here is more representative of how that's going to look. Oftentimes you'll be doing, gathering things, collecting evidence, that kind of stuff. Most of the kind of endpoints of these missions result in some kind of boss battle with this kind of setup, right? Very Souls-like, if you will, but this is not a Souls-like. That's just kind of the start there. Is oftentimes this kind of setup here will be how you experience the story, right? And the story missions, they're very bombastic, very big. They have these grandiose boss fights typically to end them off. The second thing you do is the open world, which is kind of what this screenshot here is representing. This is a lot of things, a lot of mini games, a lot of different activities, a lot of like progression systems in the open world, right? Treating different people and animals and things like that. Finding various chests, completing puzzles. Standard stuff. If you played games like Genshin or otherwise, you'll kind of know how that works. And then dungeons. And this is kind of really, I think, where the peak interest for me comes into it personally. Like, obviously, a great, story with characters and this kind of setup and the combat and stuff like that is going to appeal to a lot of people. But for me, I'm always interested in the exploration aspects and, like, the dungeon aspects. And that's where this screenshot here comes in. I would say that a large part of this game that I think would get overlooked, because I'll explain in a minute, but a large part that gets overlooked is the dungeons. These are effectively, I would say, the second part of the mission structure of the game. They're either puzzle dungeons like Legend of Zelda, or they're kind of like maybe a little bit harder, maybe like boss-focused dungeons, right? They're usually there to expand the lore and functions of the world, while also giving you a very interesting and very unique and optional form of content to do in the game, right? So broadly speaking, your time is going to be split between story missions, open world, and dungeon stuff. So you may ask, okay, we understand what the game is, you understand kind of what you're doing, how do you actually play this game? And this is something that I've seen a little bit of, not misinformation on, but definitely some skewed perspectives on. This game isn't really, as many people would say, an MMO. There is an MMO option. There's a full MMO section to the game where you can do things like guilds and raid battles and bounties and stuff like that, right? The MMO part of it, you absolutely can engage in that stuff. But the way it works is there's effectively two modes, a solo and an MMO mode. And you can play the entire game in solo mode. You don't have to interact with anyone for pretty much any of the things in the game. You can completely do it solo. You can pretend that this is a solo game. The only thing you will see occasionally is little ghost markers, similar to like Dark Souls, right? The little pins, signages, and stuff like that. But for the most part, you can play the entire game without ever seeing or needing to see any other individual or needing to interact with any of the MMO systems in the game. So that is very important because I see a lot of people just assuming that this is like an MMO light or an MMO first game. It is not. You can absolutely play most of it solo. However, there is that MMO option if you want it and if you want to engage in it in that way. There's absolutely stuff to do there, and there's also enough features like PvP and stuff that take advantage of that. There's also a co-op mode in the solo mode, so if you want you and 3 other friends, it's a 4-player online co-op. Can journey around the zones here and do that if you want, but you can absolutely, as I said, play it solo, which is very important. So those are just the basic facts and functions of the game before we get into it, helping you to understand, what the game is, how it's set up, what you're doing in it, how you can play it, that kind of stuff. So we get into the game now. I quite enjoy this game. I'm enjoying this game. I enjoyed Once Human, which was a little bit different, but it's the same similar style open world NetEase game, right? As we mentioned, you're going to have story elements. So if we just go to quests here, right, under main story, you're going to have your main story elements and various things like that. And then you're going to have your open world stuff. So if we open up the map, your markers, in this case, you have exploration quest there, landmarks. You got like a little outpost here you can do, learning abilities for the compendium, unknown quests right here, right? So you can go around and see where things are, right? A relatively standard open world stuff. However, most of these things aren't necessarily like busy work. A lot of them are like mini games. Like the Gift of Gab is like a card mini game. Healing the Goose, which is around here somewhere, is a healing mini game, right? These things here is the next part. So you have like the open world stuff. This may not seem like a big world, these two zones here, but this actually is a quite large area, considering I'm about 10-15 hours in and I've only done 12% of this one area here, right? So the open world stuff does take a bit to do. And then you have obviously these things here, which is the I would say the dungeons, or the kind of like puzzle dungeons, or the main things that are not the story focus, right? So we'll just track that real quick, and I'll show you that. So if we go to, reminding myself, we can go to journals, and then we can go to the legacy here, and this is where you're going to find the dungeons. One thing about this game, I guess my only complaint about this game since we're going through it, the menus are actually well laid out, but they're quite hard to remember, like where things are. Like if I wanted to figure out, okay, where is, the dungeons, or as I call them, the dungeons. Well, they're under story journal, and then you have to go to Yang Yu Legacy, and then you have to remember that these are what it means when it says dungeons, right? Things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that in the game. The fact that you have this menu for this region looks like this, and then you click on it and it's the same tabs above here, but they look different, and then every single tab has a different way to organize it. Slide menu, grid menu, this weird timeline looking thing, this smaller grid menu, this pop-up menu, right? Like they're all kind of different ways to organize stuff, and so while it is well laid out, it does get quite confusing, and that's pretty much my only complaint of the game is how that's set up. But back on topic now. Right, you go here, and these are your dungeons, and these are labeled, right? So you'll click on them, and it will ask you, where it is. In this case, you can just click on it, and it will show you where it is, and then you can go to it, and you do it. And these are, as I will head over to this one here, these are like a larger scale dungeon, and that's what primarily I've been doing and enjoying. But that is not to say that this is a shallow game in a way. I mean, obviously there's a lot of systems, there's a lot of things that a lot of people aren't necessarily going to like, but I would say that this game really excels in its presentation oftentimes. I don't need the horse for this. Oftentimes excels in its presentation and its visual quality and just the feeling you get when playing the game. On top of a lot of the RPG systems, I think are relatively well tuned for this game as we move along here. So as I make my way over here, I guess I would just start talking about the positives that I see in this game. And one of the positives is the combat. So if I just switch over here, broadly speaking, the way the combat works in this game is you have different like weapon classes, H, and you'll have different things here. There's a couple different types, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different weapon classes, if you will. And those will do various things. I'm using an umbrella and a sword. You can see what it qualifies as right here, and the style that it's running at. And you can actually click these, and you'll see, the kind of style you want to go through, and it shows you a demonstration of it and all that. And then you have your weapon abilities that are specific to the weapon class. You have 3 of these: your basic, your heavy, upgrades here for the talents. And if you're ever trying to remember what you have under basic martial arts, you have this. You hover over it and it shows you a little video, right, of all the things you can do. Combat is relatively in depth, so like you'll have a dodge, a jump, a defense position, your light attack combo, your jump strike, your dash while sprinting, your recovery, a specific deflect for it, and then some other heavy options for each of these ones here. And so that pretty much gives you a very large kit to work with, especially because you can switch weapons on the fly. So that's kind of how the weapon setup works there. So like for me, for the umbrella, right, my basic attack there shoots out a little thing. On top of it does damage there, and you know the light attack combo is that. If I press and hold it, I can fly up and do this, and then go back down. If I am running and hit left click, it does this little spinny thing. If I jump and hit it, it does this little twirl. If I then use my heavy attack, I can press heavy and it does this. I just spam it, and then if I hold it, it goes up here, and then I can do that and it swings around. And that's the basics of how the umbrella works on top of your normal stuff. And then you can switch to the sword, right? And then your things with the sword, holding, and that kind of stuff. So relatively speaking, on top of things like deflection and dodging, there's a good amount that you can do with the combat. You also have a bow and arrow, so if you want to do some range stuff, you can do that too, with the ability to slow down. So effectively, you have 3 different weapons here that you can utilize in both puzzle solving and in normal combat, obviously, which is very good. So that's on the weapon side. That's kind of how the weapon orientation works. And then you have character-specific skills. So if I go back to this menu, you have your mystic skills, which are character-specific, right? And in this case, there's kind of like categories here of them. I'm using kind of like the basic ones because they're working well enough. But as you can see, this one, I'm able to grab a guy and throw them. For this one, I'm able to use potential immobilization status effect. This one, I'm able to jump on an enemy and hit it with a attack there. And then you can obviously go through each of these and see which ones they do. There's a little video, and it also tells you how to learn them if you click space, and how, where you get access to them, that kind of stuff. And you have 8 of these in total that you can access. And then if you go over to the general tab, you have your standard abilities, your assist, deflect, divine counter, your passives, your movement abilities. These are not passive, but these are like not things you have to unlock. These are, you have to unlock them, but they're not like skills or RPG systems. They're just kind of like movement abilities, right? Triple jumping, hopping, being able to do a mighty drop, the kind of movement mechanics there. That's kind of how this is set up. And so overall, and then on top of this, I guess for abilities, you also have, I would say these are kind of like charms, if you will, or like benefit slots, right? There's a large quantity of these, you equip them, yada yada, right? So I would say because of all those systems, what you get is a very well-balanced system between things like, it doesn't rely too heavily on weapon combos or weapon stuff, but then it's also not relying too heavily on your character being able to do different, I'm in an, okay, well, I guess we're in combat here. You can see how this works. So I'm not sure, I'm not that good at kind of doing 2 things at once here. So, you have your basic attack. In this case, you have a deflection, which is just your E, which works really well. This is mostly a deflection game. As you can see, my Q there stuns everything. My R splits it up. My fan in the air so I can start shooting things as I bring it back down. I have assist deflection turned on, mainly because I am just trying to learn the game at the moment. And so you can kind of configure how you want the deflection to work. But for the most part, I just use it for like major attacks because it does get kind of annoying. You don't have to use it, but it is definitely something that I'd recommend turning on if you are newer to action games and you want a little bit of assistance and getting used to the controls and combat, because there is definitely something that you can learn here. Just finish this real quick. As you can see, this ability lets me switch to my weapon and go back there. And let's just do that. So as you can see, you can dodge too, so it's not just a parry game. Perfect dodge, Bayonetta style, right there. If you use some combos like what I just did there, you can pause it and then like pause the character, like time stop it, and then hit a pressure point, and that'll do something. I'm almost dead. Let's heal real quick. Your heals are interesting because they are based on like level up of a different system. So it's not like Souls where you're kind of like limited to how many heals you have or anything. For the most part, like you're not You're upgrading them in that sense, but like it's a little bit different because you're not just stuck with like one type of flask. You have like a bunch of different ones. So in that way, I think it's a little more RPG focused because you can have like a bunch of different heals or different ways to do the heals. Hopefully, I was normal and didn't blabber on too much, and then you get a chest, and that's kind of how the open world activities work, right? You're just going to kind of show up to things sometimes. So that's kind of how the combat worked. The weapons, as I was saying, I think it gives a good variety, and it's not too tied down to one thing or the other. So it's not like you're being forced into like only being able to use a certain weapon class because it has like the best abilities or anything. There's nothing like that. Let's just drop down there. There's nothing like that restrictive in the game. So I think overall the combat works really well. You can see in terms of the exploration, right? The open world things, the encampments, stuff like that. The world design here, the way it kind of operates. What you're doing, what you're able to find, so I would say it's relatively, simple. It is quite interesting in terms of like the world is quite varied with a lot of things going on, and so you never really get too bored of what you're doing. So as you can see, you go around. These are the teleport stones you have to activate. You'll go around, you'll get access to stuff, and right now this area here is like completely optional. You're not necessarily going to go into the story, but as you can see, there's a little thing there, and I believe this one gives you the like swamp area. I believe what we're coming up, the dead swamp area here. So I would say in terms of like variety of the open world stuff, there's a good amount. This is a very gray, ashen, dead trees versus where we were before, and you can see kind of the transition and the change there as we go along. But in terms of like open world setup, I think it's quite good. And so now we'll go on to this whole stuff. So if I explain every system in this game, we're going to be here for 5 hours. So I'm trying to keep it just the 3 things: a story, dungeons, and like the open world stuff. And I'll talk about some of the MMO things, because if I don't, we're going to be here forever. So right here, so we did that right here. We're going to be doing a little bit of the like dungeons, if you will. It's not all the time that it's a dungeon, but there is often times where it is a dungeon there, and you have to do dungeon things. You have to investigate some things, put things in certain places. Sometimes they're really cool where you get like whole new areas to explore, which is very nice, but that is not necessarily something you do all the time. So I just accepted the quest from the guy there, right? And you have your little things here that you can go to. As you can see, because I accepted the quest, all of a sudden we're bright as day, and it quite a bit changes the environment and how it looks. So there is I don't know if it's a real-time weather system. It might not be specifically real-time, but it's possible that it's like there is weather effects, like there's rain and stuff that happens, and it does eventually dissipate. There's sunsets, and so there's a real-time day and night cycle, even if there's not necessarily like a real-time weather forecast, which I think is nice. Gives a little bit of variety to these zones as well. And so you can do this. This may be a little bit boring because it's not necessarily there's some dungeons that are varying in quality. Some are just like standard dungeons. You go underground, you do some dungeon stuff. Other times you fight big bosses in a whole new zone here. So it is kind of variable, but I've done 7 of these at this point, so this one may be kind of like the last one, a little bit calm before the final storm, right? So that's just kind of how these work. They'll be marked by this little notebook here, and you can check it under Journal, under the Legacy here. And I believe each of the sections have that. There's a bunch of other systems, right, like factions and research ability, and development, appearance, professions you can do, wandering paths. This is kind of getting into the more like dailies. I'm not going to say dailies, but things like there's co-op here. There's the PvP arena. There's bounties, trials, PvE challenges that pop up once you've hit enough level that you can do in a variety of things. So there's stuff like that. The only other system before getting into like the MMO stuff that I would mention in terms of solo things is breakthroughs. So right now I'm level 20. That is the level cap. If I click on this, you can break through. You are technically limited to breakthroughs. However, by the time you see this and most likely play the game, you won't have to deal with this because this is a seasonal thing the game is doing. As for launch, it is not something that you're going to necessarily be getting gated, time gated, or anything like that. But basically, it is a level cap, right? You do this, it gives you like a little like a trial that you can do, and it does things, right? It increases the gameplay rewards. It's effectively like a world tier if you've played any looter shooter or any Diablo-like game. Similar to that, you increase your level cap, increase your energy, and you'll get better things by doing that. The other interesting thing I'll know about this is oftentimes if you can see, you get gear sets. So this is something that I think is kind of important for the weapon stuff that I did not mention because it's not super related to combat. You do not grind. This is not a game or an RPG where you're going to be grinding for weapons and grinding for loot. Primarily, it's a game where you're doing directly the opposite. As I showed you here, you get these given to you once you do a breakthrough. So effectively, you're not really getting, let's go back here, you're not really using this gear and getting it and trying to figure out what the best thing is. What you're doing is you're looking at this, can I equip this one? I cannot. You're looking at this and you're trying to figure out what class do I want to be, right? And once again, you go back to develop, these things, classes, right? You're figuring out which one of these weapons do you want to use and the level of that weapon in terms of your tier, which you can see if we go back here, right? Gear tier, you can see that, and that's effectively just what set you're running. As you get to level like 40, I believe you get tier 31. It kind of grows in increments, and that's effectively where you're going to look at. You don't have to grind power levels or gear or anything like that, so it's not necessarily that big of a deal. But that's kind of how that's set up. Is you're not necessarily grinding for weapons or anything like that. So the last thing I want to mention here is the MMO part of it before we get into like monetization and stuff. So you click this button, you're able to go to online mode here. As you can see, you can enter a livelier world, meet teams, do guilds, do PvP, all that stuff, and you can enter an online mode, which is good. And you can check the info button here for info about the online mode and co-op and how that works. So now we get to the monetization after we've gone through everything here. Hopefully I was able to kind of make this somewhat concise and understandable as I'm trying to do live gameplay at the same time. So let's get into monetization. A lot of people, again, this may be a misconception. This is not a pay-to-win game. This is not a gacha game for any strict definition. This game's primary way to make money is through cosmetics. So we go to the shop here, right? Cosmetics, things like gowns and horses and mounts and appearance things and boxes and sticks and stuff, right? Various items here, bounty tokens, you have transformation pills, changing appearance, stone, changing appearance, dyes, things like that, right? So the two other ways that the game makes money is, you can see here, monthly pass. This is an optional $5 a month sub that gives you optional, don't need it. As you can see here, it just gives you these, which can be exchanged for pearls, and pearls are just things that are used for the pulling system, which we'll get to, and it gives you a tiny fraction amount of coins, which barely matter at all because you get a lot of coins. Like, I'm free to play, I have like 250,000 coins at this point. An extra 90,000 coins once a month is going to do basically nothing, right? So primarily you're going to get this because you get these, which can be exchanged for pearls, and you get some Battle Pass XP, which is just exchanged for like dyes and things, right? So there's that. That's under monthly pass here. And then there's the Battle Pass, which is this thing right here. And the Battle Pass, if I hit go, takes you to this, $10, right? Standard stuff. Let's back up here. Nope, I have to go to the Battle Pass section to show this. All right. Standard Battle Pass, standard, what is that? Stuff like here. Click on there, unlock your stuff. Free version, paid version. This just gives you, as you can see, cosmetics, green stuff, which is just to be used for cosmetics. That's pretty much it. Dyes, Battle Pass tokens. You can see what the Battle Pass tokens are used for. Fish, emotes, plants, decorations for your housing, materials in the broadest sense of, like, you get these by playing the game anyway. Like, it's pretty much a throwaway. You're also going to get Battle Pass rewards, as you can see from this list here, just by playing the game. Right, you get 4 of them. You do get 8 if you pay for it, but again, you still get these. You're not like limited or anything. So that's pretty much how it works. You get your Battle Pass, you get your monthly pass back here, and then you have your various cosmetics that are quite expensive. Clearly, I mean, look at this thing. It's going to be like 30 bucks or whatever it is, 30, 35. And that's just kind of how that works. Now, the other contended point for monetization is the draw system. This looks like a gacha. It is cosmetic only. And the reason that's not nearly as bad, or not even an issue, is because the Battle Pass, right? gives you the green stuff, these things. And these things, as you can see, are used in drawing and the 2 vendors. And these 2 vendors just give you cosmetic things like plants and decoration for housing. So actually it's just used for this, right? You convert it to pearls. These are also used for poles for whatever reason. There's a bunch of stuff. For whatever reason, Echo Beads are your general like premium currency that you convert. Echo Jade is just for drawing, and these things are just for drawing for the most part. So you draw it, you get cosmetics, you can check reward preview, right? Things you can potentially get, outfits and stuff, but for the most part, right, you can see, hats, cases, fireworks, plants, horns, dyes, that kind of stuff. So it is just cosmetic only, and that's basically the way it makes money, and there's no other form of money, right? You can't like buy power, obviously. You can't buy gear or anything like that. You can't speed up any of the progress in the games. Any limits that the game has, there's no way to like decrease those. So for the most part, I would say it's pretty lenient and it's pretty generous free to play, because you do have access to everything, right? No content is like limited or time gated or anything like that. You have access to the entire game, can play to your heart's content, whatever, for free. You're not limited or feeling like you need to spend money. There's no gotcha in terms of like you're not pulling for characters or weapons or anything like that. So it's just a really convenient way to play the game. If you want to support it through things like the monthly optional pass, you can, and that will give you some stuff, but for the most part, it's not not that important. If anything, I'm concerned, and I mentioned this in the X-Defiant video on the first one on my channel, how I was concerned at how it was actually under-monetized, how it wasn't going to make enough money because what it was doing was so generous and what the updates it was doing were so large that I was worried that it was going to shut down because it wasn't making enough money. Oh, look what happened. It shut down because it wasn't making enough money because people didn't buy the battle pass or the skins in the shop because they didn't feel like they were worth it, right? I hope that this game is able to not do that and able to succeed. It has succeeded already for a year in China, but I do hope that that continues and that we see, oh, well, look at that, that we see, these things continue, because I do enjoy the game, but I do hope that the way it's monetized is actually enough for the game, and I do want it to succeed, and I don't think that anything in the shop, at least to my eye here, is worth, what is this? Well, not that one specifically, but like if I go to like 25, this thing, it's a full outfit, it looks like this, right? It's decent looking, 25.80. 25.80 is like $50, right? These are very expensive. Like even if you generously go to like the 1800, 30, 40, like this appearance here is a $40 getup. And it is a lot of stuff, right? It's glasses, it's horns, it's the thing, it's the hairstyle, it's all this that you can mix and match. But that's $40 for a costume that, looks decent, looks good enough, but it's one costume, right? There's a lot of these. There's a lot of different costumes, as you can see. And so I just don't think that this is necessarily going to be moving the needle. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but like this kind of stuff doesn't feel like it's moving the needle. There is cheaper stuff, right? This is about $20 right here. The horse designs, some of these are pretty cool. There's even cheaper stuff, $10 for these kind of things. You go, these are $1 hats. I assume hats are going to be quite popular. Little mandolin guitar, little bracelet here, right? So I assume these things are about $1. These are going to be pretty popular, various things like that. So that's pretty much how that shop and monetization works. Hopefully it's going to survive. I hope I'll be able to kind of talk through this game. There is a lot here. I skipped like a whole bunch of stuff. I pretty much didn't talk about a lot of the development, progression, upgrading, the gear setup. There's a talent tree with all the talents that you can do. The whole MMO part of the game under Wandering Path, the challenges and stuff you can do. The seasonal events, there's going to have seasonal events and things once that kicks off. Guild, social elements, sects, which are basically factions you can do, and the shops for the factions and how that works. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff in the game, but to try and keep it relatively brief, even though this is already probably half an hour long, that's kind of what the game is. So if you enjoy this stuff, want to see more of these things on the channel, want to maybe see more live gameplay things on the channel, make sure to like, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.